Did you know that there are 77 Sony E-mount lenses out there right now, 56 of which are full frame lenses? And that's just the ones made by Sony. It's actually kind of wild the amount of choice that exists in the Sony lens world. And the newest addition to that huge list of lenses is the Sony 28-70 F2 G lens. This is a really interesting addition to the lineup because it feels almost like a direct response to Canon's 28-70 f2 lens that people went absolutely crazy for. That 28-70mm focal range being known as a standard zoom lens, but the f2 aperture coming closer to what we would expect from prime lenses. So does that mean that if you get this lens, you can sell all of your primes? Well, the answer is only yes if the image quality of the zoom lens is absolutely incredible, and that's a lot harder to do with a zoom lens. Now, I did manage to get my hands on the new 28-70 from Sony, but I only had it for about a week before I had to send it back, so I really prioritized getting out there and shooting some example video footage and some example photos so that you could see the images for yourself from this lens and decide whether you think it's worth the huge $2,900 US price tag. So before we get into any of my thoughts on the size, weight, price, quality, and who I think this lens is for, let's kick things off with a little example video that I shot with the 28-70. I'm gonna go make a coffee and I'll meet you back here. So secure the cup and enjoy. The following video was shot entirely on the Sony 28-70mm f2 G lens and the Sony FX3. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. I know I had fun putting it together. Now let's talk about this lens and my experience with it, and I'll also be putting some still images on screen here and there so that you can see how it does in photography as well. Kicking things off with the build of the lens. One of the big things about the Canon equivalent to this lens is that it is absolutely huge and super heavy. So when I found out that Sony was making this lens, I wondered how it was going to compare, and in the end, I was pleasantly surprised. It is big and it is heavy, but it's not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. Weight-wise, the Sony comes in at 918 grams, which is quite a bit lighter than the Canon's 1,430 grams. It's also got a smaller diameter than the Canon at 92.9 millimeters, but it's the exact same length at 139.8 millimeters. But even though it is a little bit narrower than the Canon, it's still a big lens, and it uses a 86 millimeter mm front filter thread. This is one of the biggest challenges when I was out filming with this lens, is that I own a pile of 82mm filters. It's a pretty standard size, but nothing bigger than that. Luckily, I had some help with the Kalari clip-in filters that magnetize in front of the sensor instead of going in front of the lens. It was mostly dark enough when I was filming that I didn't really need filters, but for the couple of shots where I had the bright sky in the background, it was really nice to have something to use. If you're familiar with the 24-70 G Master version 2, this lens right here, the 28-70 f2 actually ends up almost exactly the same length when they're both extended, even though the 28-70 is a bit longer when it's not extended. Other than that, it's pretty much what you'd expect from any G Master lens these days. Custom buttons, focus toggle, declickable aperture ring, dust and moisture sealed, great handling and manual focusing. It even has the smooth and tight zoom feature that we saw on the 24-70 G Master version 2, which I really enjoy. I think when I found out that this lens was coming, I expected it to be bigger, heavier, and clunkier, and overall, I thought it was quite reasonable for what that lens is. And even though it is a heavy lens, it's about 220 grams heavier than the 24-70 G Master version 2, the weight is balanced in such a way that the lens doesn't feel hard to carry or hard to use. Something about how they've situated all the elements within the lens. In terms of autofocus, it worked great for me. Again, if you're familiar with any of the G Master lenses, this will come as absolutely no surprise. It's got 4 XD linear motors inside, and it's made to be able to keep up with the 120 frames per second speed of the A9 Mark III, and my experience was that it was on par with any of the other G Master lenses that I've used. There is very minimal focus breathing in this lens on its own, and then you also have the breathing compensation in certain Sony cameras, so breathing really isn't an issue at all. Minimum focus distance is 38 centimeters or just about 15 inches through the whole range, giving it a max magnification of 0.23 times. This felt perfectly comfortable for me for anything that I wanted to shoot up close. It is not a macro lens, but you can still get some nice close-up details. In terms of the image quality, in my personal opinion, this lens was quite impressive. It's clean, it's sharp in the center, sharp in the corners, it's got great color rendition and great contrast. There are definitely some artifacts when it comes to flaring, but I thought that they looked reasonably pleasing and interesting if that's something that you want to use as an effect. And in order to get the flaring, I literally had to point the lens directly at the sun, so I don't think it will be much of a major issue otherwise. I didn't run into it by accident anywhere else other than when I was trying to get the flaring. There is a little bit of distortion in the photos because I don't have a correction profile yet, but it wasn't enough for me to notice within normal use, and as always, once we get the correction profile, it literally won't matter. In terms of fringing and chromatic aberration, if there is some there, it's really not super noticeable or not enough to cause any issues anyway. I maybe saw a little bit of purple on some super high contrast areas when I zoom in to 200%, but I didn't see anything that comes in the out of focus areas before and after the focal plane in terms of shifting colors or anything like that. So image quality wise, it's pretty much what I would expect of any G Master lens in 2024, and especially at this price point. With that being said, let's talk about what this lens is good for, and more importantly, who this lens is good for. The big thing that this lens has going for it is that f2 aperture. I love my 24-70 f2.8 G Master version 2 lens, and my initial thought was that this lens, this 24-70, would be able to do anything that the new f2 could do. But when you break it down, that f2 is a full stop brighter than f2.8, which can be quite helpful in a lot of situations. The other part of that is that with f2 as your widest aperture, you're getting the option of shallower depth of field that you can normally only get with prime lenses. In fact, while this lens may not outperform some of the newer Sony G Master prime lenses, I wouldn't be surprised if it outperformed a lot of lower cost primes or even older Sony primes. But the flip side to all of this is that it's a fairly big lens. That filter size is a bit outside of the regular 82mm thread that a lot of people have filters for already. 28mm at its widest might not feel wide enough for everyone, and $2,900 $60 is a lot for a single lens. I do actually think that this could replace a couple of primes if you don't already like using prime lenses but need them for shallow depth of field. But to be honest, I think people who like shooting prime lenses generally seem to really enjoy that whole process anyway, so I don't see a lot of people switching just for that reason. Personally, while I was really impressed with this lens and I would be happy to recommend it to people who feels like it's a good fit for them, I think I'll probably just stick with my 24-70 G Master 2 for now because it really does everything that I need it to do and it's compatible with all of my filters. But who knows, in 6 months down the road, maybe I might look back at the time that I had with this new lens and I might want to have it again. It wouldn't be the first time. But as always, I want to hear from you. What do you think of the new 28-70 F2 G Master lens? Do you think it's worth the price tag? Is it something that you think you'll pick up? And if so, what will you use it for? Leave a comment down below and let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. So here's the movie magic. I already made my coffee. I'm just gonna pour it into my cup here. There we go, set it to the optimal temperature. Oh, that's hot.